Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another edition of the show. We've got a very fine guest today, all the way from an area just not far from London, as I just found out, Mr. Jakko Jakszyk from King Crimson. Welcome to the show.
Good evening, or good morning, good evening.
Yeah, well, it's afternoon here for me. For you, evening. Some people, it's probably in the middle of the night and what have you. We've got folks watching from all over the place. So Jakko's coming on the show because he's got a brand new solo album that we want to talk about for InsideOut Records called Secrets and Lies, and that's coming out, I believe, the third week in October. Correct? Right around there.
October the 23rd.
Good. I was very close. All right, great. So with this new album coming out, wanted to talk a little bit about the album and kind of get your take on the creation of the album. So I've had a chance to listen to the record. It's very cool, very different in spots. I think, for those folks who are looking for the big guitar extravaganzas from you, you get a little bit of that, but the album is very vocal oriented. Some really nice melodies, lots of different flavors and textures. And it's not very King Crimson-ish for the most part. Was that your plan from the beginning with this record, to kind of go outside of the King Crimson style box for something a little bit different?
Not really. I guess the songs themselves kind of dictated where it might go stylistically. There's three tunes on there that are that were presented to Robert, as indeed I present many things, and a number of them are now within the Crimson repertoire. But there's three tunes on here where we used to have this little in-joke where Robert would say, I love this song. I think it's marvellous. It's an ideal track for your new solo album, which was not so subtle code for we're not playing this.
Exactly.
So there's three of those tunes on this album. All of which have contributions from some of the guys, if not all of them, Rob, and they're co-written with Robert. So,
well, one track in particular, now that you kind of bring that up, I believe it's the last song on the album, "Separation." I mean, like the first 10 seconds of that, I was like, wow, this sounds like it could be a brand new King Crimson song, but yet you've got this kind of like Islands Lizard feel to it, with that. I'm assuming that's Mel on saxophone. You got the dissonant guitar going on. So how did that song come about? I mean, that to me, that sounds like that could be brand new King Crimson.
Well, after we made A Scarcity of Miracles, and there was some talk about playing live as, I think they were calling it Project 7 at the time. And then that idea kind of faded away. And then Robert would come by. I live about 5 minutes, well, he's just moved, but historically I've lived about 5 minutes away from Steve Wilson. So Robert would do these trips to this neck of the woods, which he started to refer to as the Crimson Triangle, because Declan, who runs the record label, is about 20 minutes that way, and Steve's 5 minutes that way. Gavin is about 25 minutes a bit further down. So there's a lot of Crimson activity around here. So he would come to Steve's to see the progress on some of the remixes, and then he would come here for a day or two, and he would play me new bits that he'd written. It might be a double guitar thing that he would teach me one of the parts to. And whenever he came, I would record everything, invariably to some kind of tempo reference. And some of those songs developed into things that we play live. And that track in particular was variations. In fact, that wasn't all in one visit. I think he was writing these variations. So he kept adding to that, because I can't remember the name we had for it, but I had a name for it that we stored. And then slowly I pieced it together. And then there were some sections that he'd recorded in a different tempo, so I had to learn how to play it. And then I got Gavin involved, and then I got Tony to play the bass and Mel to play the sax. And so it developed into this thing, which, again, it was one of the tunes that Robert was kind of interested in, and then for some reason it didn't click with him. So I thought, well, there you go. well, he's right. I'll stick it on my solo album.
I mean, nothing against Robert, but I think he missed the boat on that one. But
Well,
it's okay. Hey, you know what? You got it on your solo album. It's good for
it's
you,
all,
right?
It's all subjective. And the other thing I would say is there are two other tunes. There's a tune called Uncertain Times,
Yep.
which I wrote for Crimson, and Under Lock and Key, which is this ballad, which is actually based on some previously unreleased archive recordings of Robert doing Frippatronics in the 70s. And the thing is, once Robert goes for something, and then we'll sit and we'll work some stuff out, and then we'll take it into rehearsals. It will go a certain way, but if it doesn't go a certain way, then it's left to me. So I guess I then take it in a different place. So I guess, in essence, they're the same songs and the same piece of music, but these are my versions of them, if you will.
Sure.
So I think so if they sound less crimson-y, it's because I've pulled them in a slightly different direction, maybe. But other tunes on the record, they come from a different place and they emanate from it. None of it was kind of preordained. It wasn't I'm going to write something that sounds like Crimson, or I'm not going to write something like Crimson. It's just how it came out. Or and once you start doing it, it kind of it develops a life of its own. Or again, it kind of reveals to you what it's going to become in a way.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I get that feel like Fool's Mandate, for instance, one that really stuck out to me, because it kind of has this kind of like world music meets like electronica feel to it, like really good hooks in the song. And
that tune in particular was, one of the reasons I ended up making a solo record was that I kept bumping into Peter Hamill, who I've known on and off for a number of years, and I was a huge Van de Graaf fan and a huge fan of it's about 4 of his solo albums that were a kind of constant soundtrack to my teenage years, and so I kept bumping into Peter, and Pete, every time I saw him, he said, "Have you started making a solo album yet?" And I'd say, "Oh no, I don't think anyone wants to hear that, do they really?" And he said, "You're mad, you must, this is your moment, you must." So the last time I bumped into him and he said that, I said, "I'll tell you what, Peter, I will make a solo record on one condition: you agree to be on it." And he said, "Of course." So when I started it, I approached him and I said, "You know what? I don't want to just bung you on backing vocals or something, because that just seems tokenistic. I thought I'd like to collaborate." And he said, "Well, have you got any bits of music that you've not kind of finished, or stuff that you could develop in a different way?" And I said, "All right, well, let me think about that." So I've got a number of instrumental pieces that, as you point out, are kind of based more on a kind of world music thing. And I use some of them as, when I do stuff for PRS guitars, for instance, if I play live or do a video thing, I try and play over more interesting or unusual or unexpected pieces, because a lot of those kind of guitar guys, it's kind of, rock or fusion. So I chose one of those, and it's based on some Middle Eastern music, this piece. So I sent that to Peter, and then it came back with all these backing vocals and multi-track vocals and bits of guitar he played on as well. And the lyric was kind of ambiguous, but it suggested something. So that's how that tune came about, really, between the two of us.
Cool. So, so we've been talking about some people who have appeared on the album. So in addition to Peter and members of King Crimson, who else did you have help out on this record?
Well, there's 1011 Mel Kynes. Gavin Harrison plays drums on all but one track. There is a bass player called John Giblin, who was on Pete Gabriel's third album. Lots of Kate Bush stuff. In fact, he did the run of shows at Hammersmith that Kate Bush did in 2014. He's a great bass player. And also Mark King from a band called Level 42. Because I was lead guitarist in that band.
Right.
So there's those guys. My son plays bass on 2 tracks, and my daughter wrote 1 track as well as plays piano on it.
Cool. It's a good cast. So you know, we talked about Fool's Mandate, and I do want to mention the title track, which I think is a really beautiful song. Has Inside Out thought about releasing anything as singles? I know singles is kind of like a weird term these days, but
yeah, well, there's two. I don't know if you've seen the videos. There's currently two videos out. There's one, this beautiful animated video for the song "The Trouble with Angels," which is made by this incredible Iranian animator. The second video is for a song called "It Would All Make Sense," which is a true tale based on betrayal and infidelity. That I can look back with a degree of clarity 20 years or so on, you know. And the video for that is basically just me pretending to get shit-faced on a bottle of tequila. And the third video, which is my favorite, is yet to come out, and that's for Uncertain Times, and that features that's another animation by Sam Chagini. It's really good, and it also guest stars someone I guess you won't have heard of, but he's quite a famous comedian and actor here in England, a guy called Al Murray, and so he takes a starring role in that.
Cool. I'll have to look all these up. That sounds great. The Borders We Traded. Yeah. Some great a cappella vocals on there. How many different voices? How many different voice tracks did you use?
I don't remember, but there's in excess of 20, I should imagine.
I was going to say, yeah.
The idea was to try and do something that had a kind of harmonic density, you know, singing unusual intervals within the chord, you know, semitones and tones. You know, like the Bulgarian women's choir, I guess, who I've seen a number of times, who are brilliant. But also, I was there's a Todd Rundgren album called A Cappella.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And so you know, there's a beautiful track on there called Pretending to Care. So, and the subject matter, you know, it's all about my I was adopted as a kid, so it's about my birth mother, who I eventually found when I was in my early 20s, and she was Irish and quite a well-known singer in Ireland in the 50s. And she came to England to further her career, but ended up marrying an American GI, and ended up, I'm not sure what she was expecting. I'm sure she saw a lot of movies and had an idea of what America was like. But she ended up living in a place called Bearden, Arkansas, which may or may not have lived up to her expectation.
Chances are probably not.
Well, I've been there a few times, and it's yeah, it's something of a culture shock for me, at least.
I can imagine. Yeah. So you've got a song also called "The Rotters Club is Closing Down," inspired by Hatfield in the North at all, or the book, or?
Yeah. No, well, I'll tell you what, it's all about Pip. It's about Pip Pyle, and in the early 80s, I got to know Dave Stewart, keyboard player from Hatfield, who I was a big fan of, and I naively gave him a tape of my then band, and he was very sweet and tolerant and came to several shows and brought Bill Bruford with him, and they were very nice. And I remember rehearsing with him and Bill at a rehearsal facility in London. I'm not sure what that was for, but I know it was curtailed because this would have been early 80s, so Crimson started again and Bill went off to do Discipline, and Dave said he wanted to carry on touring, so he formed a band. Hello?
I'm still here.
You've been signed out because your account is signed in for another device. What the hell does that mean?
I don't know.
Bear with me. I'm going to try and get back in. This isn't live, right?
No, but you're still here. You're still going. Just keep talking. Don't worry about what it says.
You can see me, can you?
I can see you and hear you. Yep, everything's fine.
Okay. Well, my screen just went blank, and I got this thing. Okay, right. Well, so yeah, rehearsing with Bill Bruford, and Dave Stewart said that he wanted to keep playing and formed a band with myself, Pete Pardo on drums, and a guy called Rick on bass, and we toured around England and Europe, and we did, on the first tour, we did a lot of Hatfield stuff, so including Share It. And so I got to know Pete very well, and Pete was something of an incorrigible rogue. You know, he behaved very badly, but he did so with such charm. He seemed to get away with it. And he was always like that. And I've had, you know, many a drunken evening and an appalling hangover the next day with Pip and various cohorts. And Pip, after some Hatfield gigs, came back to Paris where he was living, and he went on a bender and ended up dying in a hotel room with a woman he shouldn't have been with, as I recall. And so I went to the funeral, and the funeral was one of the most extraordinary things I've ever seen. It was so full of, well, A, you know, as a fanboy, it was full of all these kind of Canterbury legends.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And B, it was his kids had organised it, and it was so kind of full of warmth and love. It was a stunning thing. And you know, you go backstage and you see all these flight cases with stamps on them and old stickers and backstage passes and stuff. Well, that's what they did to his coffin. So when his coffin came in, it was covered in all these stickers and backstage. And it was amazing. And there was a bit of a wake afterwards where Richard Sinclair sang God's Song, and he wandered over to me, and I joined in with him briefly. And then on the way back to London, I gave a lift to, I don't know if these names mean anything to you, Peter Blegvad, John Greaves from Henry Cow and National Health, and indeed Jonathan Coe, who wrote a novel called The Rotters Club, based on the second album, that
right. Wow.
Title track. So the song is about Pip, yeah, I chose to call it The Rotters Club is Closing Down, i.e. being, you know, he was the Rotters Club, he was the head of the Rotters Club, and, you know, it's no longer here. Right. And I tried to do it in a kind of an affectionate Hatfield style.
Which you did, and I think you succeeded at.
Okay, good. Well, thank you very much.
So you've had, you know, we've talked about a lot of the cool things you've done during your career. You've had a long, you know, successful career, playing with a lot of different artists and bands, and done lots of cool session work. So how does it feel now to be in King Crimson after all that you've already done? I mean, is it still as exciting as the first day you joined? And like,
well, I think, you know, when you're a kid and you're going up, I guess in America it would be high school, and people tell you all these stories, and it's and the prospect is incredibly scary. And then eventually you get there and you get used to it, and it becomes what you do. So there's an element of that going on where I'm a grown-up professional and this is the job that I'm doing. Yeah. However, there is still a 13-year-old boy in me going, you know, I can't believe I'm in. It is like the maddest childhood dream made flesh. You know, I saw Crimson when I was 13 at this local town near here in Watford, and I was completely blown away. And I left there thinking that somehow my life had been altered or changed, which I remember in the 80s when I'd become a bit more cynical, having been in the business for a while, thinking it was a rather naive and childish thing to think. But listen, you know, and then you end up in the band. It's bonkers, absolutely bonkers. And the very first show we did was in Albany. I guess is up the road from you a bit, right?
Yeah.
And you know, it was very emotional. It was the you know, we came back, did an encore, and played Schizoid Man, which is a track my next door neighbour played to me when I was 11. And there I am on stage singing it, and stood in between Tony Levin and Robert Fripp. It's absolutely bonkers. So there's still a part of me that's there, and I kind of think that's a good thing in a way, because it, you know, you can get lost and you can lose sight of why you wanted to do this in the first place.
Sure.
And I think if you can somehow retain that that youthful enthusiasm, and realize how incredibly lucky that I have been. That's always my advice, really, is you just got to be lucky, and I've been incredibly fortunate.
Yeah.
I think the second gig I ever saw was Yes, and if you'd have told me then, you see that drummer, you're going to remix his first 2 solo records, and the bass player, you're going to mix his solo album as well. It's all bonkers.
Yep.
And before I lost vision, I could see you were wearing a Jethro Tull t-shirt.
That's right. That's right.
And I've been fortunate enough I've done a lot of work with Ian as well. And so, yes, it has been extraordinary, really. And I'm very, very fortunate and well aware of how fortunate I've been.
Yeah, I think it's a ride that a lot of people would love to be in your shoes, right? And I think when it's all said and done, you're going to look back pretty fondly, I think, at all that you've accomplished.
Yeah, there's some scary moments. I'm sure there's some moments where they wouldn't want to be in my bloody shoes, I'll tell you that. But on the whole, yeah.
So speaking of scary, or maybe not scary, so I was, you guys have been pretty busy the last couple of years. I was in the audience that very night at New York's Radio City Music Hall for the 50th anniversary show. How magical was that?
Oh, that really was magical. That's one of the, I mean, we had many highlights last year because we played some incredible venues, but I really loved that. I had a great evening that evening. I thought it was, the crowd was magical, the venue's magical.
Yeah.
And just to get, I tell you what, man, to walk up from the hotel and get outside and see King Crimson sold out was amazing.
My friend and I, we were walking down the street, walking up to the venue, and we had to take a picture of that because it's like, yes, who would have thought in 2019 that King Crimson would be selling out the famous Radio City Music Hall? How cool is that, right?
It's extraordinary. This current lineup has become quite the draw. We've been playing to increasingly bigger crowds, and that. On that tour after New York, we went down south, and then we went to Brazil, and we headlined the Sunset Stage at Rockin' in Rio, and that was 120,000 people.
Wow!
And the last 2 shows we did were in Santiago in Chile, and that's 12,000 people a night. And we sold out 2 nights.
That's fantastic.
It's extraordinary, Yeah, it's amazing.
So we got COVID-19 happening right now. So this has obviously derailed a lot of things for a lot of bands. So once this kind of, once we get over this little hump here, what's kind of next on the agenda for King Crimson?
Well, the honest answer is I don't know. We've had to reschedule because we were meant to be back in the States this year in the summer. So we've rescheduled those dates for next summer. And then there's some touring at the end of the year elsewhere in the world. And then I don't know. We live in uncertain times. Yeah, indeed. And the honest answer is I have no idea. I'm not sure any of us really know. So
any talk of a new album?
Well, there's always talk of a new album. And David Singleton, the band's manager, has got a great diplomatic response to that question, which is there are no plans currently to record a new album. However, there are no plans not to. So,
of course.
And there's enough material lurking around. But right now, in some ways, right now would be the ideal time to do it. However, I think, we would want to be in the same room. I don't think we want to do it completely virtually.
Right.
And of course, we can't do that. Even without COVID, it's an incredibly costly thing to do. Putting the band together just to rehearse costs a fortune. You've got to fly Pat and Tony over, or we have to fly over to America, and we live in a topsy-turvy world. Even before the virus, we live in a world where historically you toured to promote an album. And of course now everything's turned on its head, and actually you tour to earn a living, and the album's almost like it's like a token or a memento of the show in a way, because sales have kind of been screwed by the whole internet thing.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I don't know.
Okay, well, we'll see. We'll see. We'll see, I guess.
Yeah.
Anything new for you on the mixing front? I know you and Stephen Wilson have been very busy in recent years of,
Yeah, I kind of stopped doing it because I'm not an engineer, by which I don't mean I can't technically do that. Of course I can, but I think, an engineer as a profession has to have a certain mentality, which I'm not sure I possess. But by which I mean, you have to spend hours and hours and hours with music that you may not like. So, unless it's music I really like, I'm less inclined to do it. It's not very well paid. I'm not sure what people think. I'm sure they don't think that, but it's not particularly well paid. And each job is very different. Some jobs are easier than others. The 2 Emerson, Lake and Palmer albums I did were crikey. When you're in that in the suite transferring the original multi-track tapes to digital format, many albums from that era, 2-inch tape was expensive. It was a budgetary concern, and consequently, most bands from that era, there's 3, maybe 4 reels that you have to deal with and go through. And then when I agreed to do the Emerson, Lake and Palmer thing, there were 42 multi-tracks. Each multi-track's between 15 and 20 minutes long. I mean, it's a lot of stuff. And there were no track sheets at all.
Wow.
They'd all got lost in they'd all got lost over time. And they did send me some JPEGs of some of the boxes, but A, some of the tapes were in the wrong boxes, B, they weren't in the original boxes. And after going through this mass of stuff, one track was missing. We could not find Welcome Back, My Friends. It was nowhere. And then we got a guy to go to America and go through the archive, the Warner's archive, I think it was in Burbank. Couldn't find it. And eventually I got in touch with the guy who was in charge of the archive here, and he sent his spreadsheet of everything they had. And through kind of detective work, I found some unmarked tapes. And I said, it's got to be them. And he said, no, it can't be there because they never recorded at that studio. And I said, well, just because they didn't record there doesn't mean that the tape didn't end up there. And then we got those tapes out of storage. And then we argued with the record company because then they had to transfer them again, and there's a cost implication. And sure enough, we found the missing tape. But yeah, it took weeks before I could even start mixing it, just trying to find out where all the different bits were, because on some of the longer pieces, they would do an edit where, let's take the first half of that tune from take 5 on tape 15, and stick it together with the second half of it, which is take 4 on tape 12, But of course, I've got to do that because I'm doing the surround mix. I can't do that after we've mixed it. I've got to do it in the multi-track thing, so you have to find these things and edit them together. So it was a challenge. There's been a few challenges,
It sounds like a tedious process to me.
Well, it can be, yeah. That's what I mean, really. If you're not into the kind of the meticulous mechanics of it all. Yeah. So I haven't done any in a while. There's a couple I might do, but we'll wait and see.
Okay. So before I let you go, got to talk gear a little bit. So you mentioned Paul Reed Smith guitars before. So what's some of the guitars you used on the new album, and what pick up anything new lately? What kind of stuff you've been playing on?
Well, yes. I mean, I've got a whole array of PRSs. The special one that they made me, which you've seen me play, right? With the shall I get it?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, well, it's hanging on the wall here. And as I can't see myself anymore, you'll have to direct.
I'll help you out.
They made me this special.
Wonderful.
Yeah. And you have to see it in real life. It looks like it's made out of porcelain. The finish is fantastic. And and it's got a piezo in the bridge, so I've got 2 outputs. So I mix that together, and I'm currently using a thing called a Helix, which Line 6 made.
Right.
And it's got 2 separate inputs, which means I can treat the magnetic signal and the piezo signal separately, but then save them as a patch and then just go from that to somewhere else.
Gotcha. Okay.
So I was using that. I've got a guitar I bought on tour with Crimson. Listen, one of the joys of touring used to be arriving at a town somewhere and then seeking out the local guitar shop.
There's not a lot of them left. Yeah.
No, they've got, New York, man. It was 55th Street or whatever it was.
Yeah, 54th Street. Yeah.
54th,
Guitar Row is no longer Guitar Row anymore.
It's all gone, man. It's gone.
Yeah.
It's a nightmare. So I found this. In fact, I walked past it by accident. We had a day off in Amsterdam. And I got up early. It was a beautiful summer's day. And I walked to the Rijksmuseum and I went to the Van Gogh Museum. And I passed this shop on the way, and I thought, I must have a look at that on the way back. And it was full of mad vintage gear, like old 70s keyboards. There was a Polymoog and all sorts of stuff. And upstairs I had this glass case, and it had a guitar I've never seen in real life. It's a Gibson ES150D. Is this show kind of guitar-y? I didn't realize it was guitar-y, is it?
We often talk about guitar stuff on this show, yeah.
Okay.
So feel free. We're going to get a lot of guitarists who watch this, so yeah.
All right. Do you want to see this guitar?
Absolutely.
Okay, so when you look at it, I've seen pictures of it, but I've not seen one in real life. And when you look at it straight on, it looks like a 335.
It certainly does, yeah.
But when you look at it sideways,
oh wow,
it's like a 175 depth.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah.
And I thought, oh man, I've got to try that. And it had it's got this beautiful slim neck.
And so that's got the center block right behind the pickup.
No center block. No, so it's a true semi.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a 175. And so I phoned up my guitar tech from the shop and said, if I buy a guitar, have we got room in the flight case? He went, yeah. So, and then I took it, the next sound check, I took it, and Robert saw it and said, wow. He said, well, can't you play that somewhere? I went, oh, all right. So I use it in a couple of numbers now. I play it in the part of the Lizard Suite that we do, and I play it in when we do Islands as well.
Wow. Well, you have to remember now, when you come back to the U.S. for another tour and you guys play in New York, you got to make sure you play that so I can point to everybody next to me and saying, Jakko showed me that on my show. I love the color. It's like a kind of nice walnut. Yeah, really nice.
It's great. So I use this. I used what else did I use? I've got an SG61 reissue SG. I use that on a few things, but it's mostly the PRSs. But I did mess around with amps, and because I had the time, I mucked around with all sorts of different tonality and on the whole record.
Cool, awesome. Well, thanks so much for showing us all that stuff and spending some time with us here today, Jakko. We really appreciate it. So everybody make sure you be on the lookout for Secrets and Lies on Inside Out Music, October 23rd. Really cool album, lots of variety on it. Great vocals, by the way. I got to say, your singing sounds great. It's like, if you've seen King Crimson and you hear Jakko singing the Greg Lake and the John Wetton stuff and all that 80s stuff, you got to hear him on his own material. It's just really, really lovely vocals and stellar guitar work, great keyboard work, great melodies, all sorts of variety in the songs. I think the album's got a lot to offer. So want to thank Jakko Jakszyk for joining us here today. Visit us on the web at www.seaoftranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, of course, we're here on YouTube all the damn time. For Jakko, I am Pete Pardo. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.